In the late 19th century, the European powers were engaged in an intense scramble for Africa. The continent, rich in natural resources and vast landscapes, had long been a target for European explorers, traders, and missionaries. However, by the 1880s, European nations sought to formalize their control over African territories, leading to one of the most consequential events in modern history, the Berlin Conference. The road to Berlin. For centuries, European interactions with Africa had been limited to coastal trading posts where they engaged in commerce, including the transatlantic slave trade. However, as industrialization took hold across Europe, there was a growing demand for raw materials such as rubber, palm oil, gold, and diamonds. At the same time, European powers sought new markets for their manufactured goods. The competition among European nations for African land intensified after the successful exploration missions of men like David Livingstone and Henry Morton Stanley. Reports of Africa's riches spread, and soon nations like Britain, France, Portugal, and Belgium began asserting claims over large territories. The rivalry between these colonial powers became increasingly aggressive, leading to conflicts and tensions that threatened to erupt into war. Recognizing the need for a structured approach to the division of Africa, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck called for a conference in Berlin. His goal was not only to prevent conflict among European powers, but also to strengthen Germany's influence in global politics. The conference would define territorial claims, establish rules for future colonization, and lay the foundation for European imperial control over Africa. The Berlin Conference, 1884 to 1885. From November 15, 1884, to February 26, 1885, representatives from 14 European nations and the United States gathered in Berlin. Among them were Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, Spain, and Italy, nations that had significant interest in Africa. Notably absent from the conference were African rulers, leaders, and representatives. The fate of the continent was being decided without the involvement of the people who lived there. The conference was chaired by Bismarck, who sought to maintain European peace while ensuring a fair division of African territories. The participants established several key agreements, including the principle of effective occupation. European powers could only claim a territory if they had established control through administration, treaties, and military presence. This rule encouraged European nations to expand further inland, often using force against African communities. The free navigation of major rivers. The Niger and Congo rivers were declared open to free trade for all nations, facilitating the exploitation of Africa's interior resources. The ban on the slave trade. Although European nations had largely abolished the transatlantic slave trade, this provision was symbolic, as forced labor and exploitation continued under colonial rule. Partition of African territories. European nations agreed on spheres of influence, dividing Africa into zones controlled by different colonial powers. This led to the arbitrary drawing of borders that ignored ethnic, cultural, and linguistic boundaries. The legacy of the Berlin Conference. By 1914, nearly 90% of Africa was under European rule. The only exceptions were Ethiopia, which successfully resisted Italian invasion at the Battle of Adwa, and Liberia, founded by freed African Americans. The impact of colonial rule shaped Africa's political, economic, and social structures for decades. When African nations gained independence in the mid-20th century, they inherited the colonial borders established in Berlin. Many countries face internal strife due to ethnic divisions, economic exploitation, and political instability. The legacy of the Berlin Conference remains a critical chapter in Africa's history, serving as a reminder of the continent's resilience despite centuries of external interference. Conclusion: the Berlin Conference was a defining moment in Africa's history, demonstrating how European imperial ambitions disregarded African sovereignty. The division of Africa without African participation set the stage for colonial rule, exploitation, and long-term consequences that continue to shape the continent today. Understanding this history is crucial in recognizing the challenges and resilience of Africa and its people in the face of historical injustice.